well, it goes back to what we were saying before.
Right.
There's surface information, and then there's trying to get to the nuts and bolts of why things were done, how they were done, and for what reason, so that we could possibly use that to develop something here for ourselves, for our benefit, you know? And, you know, like I was talking about Europe, that they discovered a lot about their ancient past. If you think about it, you go to Washington, D.C., the main buildings, the Washington Monument, Federal Reserve Building, they were all based on Greek architecture. It's called neoclassical now, like new classical. So they took what was in the past, they modified it, and they used it for their own system. Even democracy comes from ancient Egypt. We go on and about democracy now, but they've tweaked it for their benefit, and now they use it as the structure to run the government here and other governments around the world. So
Right.
the point I'm making is that once you start digging, there's a lot in ancient Egypt, just as an example. That's just one civilization that we can pull from.
Right.
And because what we need here is some kind of cohesive, coherent system that Black people understand, or else it's going to be, you know, whatever's going on with hip hop, which we know now is just gone negative in the last 20, 30 years.
Unfortunately.
It's going to be TV shows, and they're
Right.
only going to allow things that fit the mainstream narrative, which are stereotypes.
Absolutely.
Basically. I rarely see things that go beyond stereotypes.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, let me chime in just
Yeah.
a second. And, you know, even with the current COVID-19 scare and this whole thing, that this whole pandemic, so-called pandemic and fake virus scare, and that's really the way I see it. I don't wear a mask. Some of my people do, some of my family do. And I sit there and I try to basically educate them and train them on some of the theories that I've learned. And but I'm not. It's such a touchy issue right now.
Very touchy.
Everybody has like a personal belief that they're going on in terms of this whole thing, and the way that it's shutting down the whole economy, and then forcing people and infringing upon our constitutional rights. You know, we have the right to peacefully protest. We have the right to go to work and have a job, and all these different rights and stuff are being violated just on the basis of a scare tactic and a narrative that these vaccination people have brought forth. So I just want you to chime in on your take on this whole scenario before you get back into the other thing you were talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. We have to be vigilant about our rights and what's going on, because from what I've seen, once they're taken away, you know, incrementally, piece by piece, they don't come back.
You can't get them back.
They don't come back. You know, I remember in college, I did a paper on the War Powers Act, or just, you know, the ability of the president to declare war. This sounds ridiculous now, but there was a time when the president had to go to Congress and present the case before he declared war. And Congress, he had to get the consent of the Congress.
Right.
That doesn't happen now at all. You just go, they do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And we don't even think about it. So the big thing is, if you think about this, the majority of Americans don't want war. We didn't want to go to Iraq the first time or the second time, Afghanistan, for the most part. You know, a lot of these other wars and invasions, that's not what we want.
No.
But we don't have any say over that, because that's been given away a long time ago, or taken away, you know. And then even after the 9/11, you had the Patriot Act that took a few more rights.
A lot of our freedom, our rights to privacy on our cell phones. They can listen in anytime they get ready. If there's a trigger word or something that comes out of our mouths while we're having a conversation, it can tweak off, you know, these AI people, and they can be listening in on our calls just like
Right.
that. I mean, it's just the
But,
patriot.
but what I found too is that it's hard to get across to people that there's some people who are that think on such psycho terms as to allow something like this to happen.
Right.
Power. But people get power not by accident, by planning. And so a lot of these incidents, war, if that was done for profit, for Bell Helicopter, for the oil companies, for the drugs that were over there, etc., that doesn't mean that people weren't really dying in the Vietnam War. Right. And I wouldn't deny that people are dying. I'm not saying that this disease is fake or the virus is fake. I don't know. But I do know this. A lot of the deaths that they've calculated have been worded in an interesting way where they make it, somebody died with the coronavirus, but not from the coronavirus. Right. I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And we're not really clear on how many deaths there actually were. And they do use that to scare people. And they will admit that, but they'll admit it to say, because we want to make everybody safe. So we're scaring you into wearing masks. We're scaring you into staying home. Right. But my only point is this, is that if people, I wouldn't say it's fake. People are dying. I don't know how many, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't use people's deaths in order to advance whatever this strategy is that they have to gain more power.
Absolutely. Just what really interested me at this particular point was how Bill Gates came into the picture. And he had a big symposium, I guess, a few years ago where he talked about depopulating the world and how the world is grossly overpopulated and how he thinks a vaccine is the best thing to ultimately control the population. But then he invested a whole lot of money into this vaccination type thing. So here it's coming back around now. Okay. This is, and you're seeing him out there too, speaking about this, and he's talking about being prepared for the big one or some big epidemic or whatever. And they're trying to say this is it. I mean, they're pretty much saying that this is it, but they pretty much warned us that this was coming, basically. There were a lot of people that knew that this whole thing was coming. And people have been talking about it for a long time, and now it's here. So now everybody's got to decide, what are we going to do about it? You as an individual. I mean, if you're working for a company that basically participated in the lockdown, or they got some of the stimulus money, or they're in with the government, they're going to send you home and they're going to do the lockdown and they're going to be having on masks and all this kind of stuff. But by the same token, you have another part of the community and the city and whatnot that are privately owned businesses or whatnot, not getting any government money. They're doing their own thing. They're going to work. That's their livelihood. They're not letting some big government tell them that they can't make money anymore and they can't make food for their families and stuff like that. So I see the big picture in this whole deal, man. And it's, I see it from a lot of different angles.
Yeah, well, that's the best way to look at things, because there's 360 degrees to the earth and to a circle. So it's not just one side or the other side. There's a lot of sides. And you have to try to see as many as possible to get to the truth.
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were talking about the pyramids or something.
Oh, all I wanted to say was, if you have that information and you have a better grasp on it, people can't come along and say, oh, well, why are you talking about ancient Egypt? Two things. One, you guys weren't ancient Egyptians. They weren't even black. And then two, even if they were, you guys came from West Africa. You came from, Nigeria or Gambia or something like that. And so what I pointed out in my book was, one, you can't get caught up into the racial stuff.
Right.
Because we didn't invent this whole racial system. It doesn't make sense. It only makes sense for the people who set it up. Absolutely. For their benefit.
Yes.
When we were in Africa, we didn't consider ourselves even black. And I'm not saying we shouldn't call ourselves black, but I'm just saying we should think about these things.
Absolutely.
We
just color, and it's not the actual color of our skin.
It's simplistic. It's really simplistic. Yeah. We were different ethnic groups. We were different tribes. We were different families.
Right.
And we had regional connections. Okay? And they meant something. If you were Fulani, that meant a particular thing, a certain lifestyle, a way of thought, belief systems that you had. You see? But if you just say black, it doesn't really get that far.
Anything, no, it's something someone else made up.
Right. To
classify us as.
Yeah, if we were all black, we wouldn't see each other as black because there's nothing to compare it to.
Well, yeah. I mean,
yeah. So anyway, it's important to understand that a lot of the people, and I have it documented in my book, from Nubia.
Go ahead and let the people know what the title of your book is.
Oh yeah, the title of the book is Inner Civilization. Boom, got it right here. I don't know if that's backwards.
No, actually it's coming through quite clearly. Okay. Let me just go ahead and read that for my listening audience.
Yeah, it's Inner Civilization. It's called Redeveloping Black Culture and Civilization in America.
So Inner Civilization and Redeveloping Black Culture and Civilization in America by Alan Dixon.
Right.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what it's about. I'll give you a quick rundown what it's about. But I just wanted to make this point, though, that there were people from Nubia. Once the Romans and the Greeks started coming down into Egypt, a lot of people started migrating west from Nubia, from Aswan, from those areas. And Africa wasn't necessarily set up north-south. There was a large caravan route that went east and west just below the Sahara. That was a large trade route. So there was a big connection between East Africans and West Africans. And there are people in Gambia, where we came from, that said their people descended and came from Nubia in that region of southern Sudan. So we are connected to the people from ancient Egypt, even if we're from West Africa, because we all know we're all connected anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
But once you start seeing this, nobody can separate and divide you out and say, well, why are you looking at this? You're West African. Yeah, we're West African, but where did the West Africans come from? They came from East Africa, where all civilization came from. You see? Absolutely. And it's that level. People can't just throw nonsense at you. Sure. Once you really, really understand, there's no need to get upset. There's no need to, call people names and everything. You just say, look, this is the information. And if they don't understand it, they don't understand it. It's not for them. Right. It's really for us, for our development.
Yes. On that note, this is a great segue into that, and I'm glad you made that point. What or how do you feel the impact of these Hebrew Israelites that are springing up all over the country? The brothers in the blue and gold.
Not familiar with them.
They're on the streets and they're preaching from the Bible, and they're telling the story right out of the Bible, and they're basically debating anybody that wants to refute the information that they're preaching right out of the Bible. Now, recently, in my city, a lot of them have abandoned their little gathering areas that they were in. It's almost like I heard they had gone over to another country or something. They had took a pilgrimage in a big, large group over to, I don't know where they went back to, but somewhere in a big, large group they went, and they're forming some type of, I don't know, quasi revolution or something like that, because those guys were really very enthusiastic and emphatic about what they believe in.
Yeah. Well, I'm from New York, and we've had them. They used to hang out in Times Square since the 70s. So we've been familiar with them for a long time. Well, I mean, all I can say is, if you really look at the Bible, let me back up. If you really look at those books for what they are, you'll find that it's talking about people in North Africa. It's talking about people in Arabia and, around Syria, etc., at a time when that whole area was Black, and Sumer as well. And I have some of this documented in my book, that the people that Abraham descended from were clearly Black. And I have, pictures of them, the family that he came from.
Yes.
So that's definitely the case. Now, I wouldn't go as far as saying all Black people are Israelites. I've looked at their doctrine, and they're saying that, we are directly the people who are spoken about in Exodus. It's Exodus 15:35. It says, your people shall be strangers in the land that is not theirs.
Right. And what about the part where we were supposed to be enslaved because we disobeyed God and we're now being punished? What about that whole?
Yeah, well, there's a lot about that. Again, that's in my book too.
Okay.
There's a big misunderstanding about
Is your book on Amazon? Is your book on Amazon?
Yeah, the best way to find it, I have it direct, where you could just go to innercivilization.com.
Okay.
Hit pay, PayPal, boom, and it'll come right to your house in 2 days.
That's the best way to do it.
I skipped the middleman, if you don't mind.
No, I don't, because my book is out and I go through Amazon, but they're slicing me right down the middle. So,
yeah, but I should have some just for availability, because people trust Amazon and they know it.
Right.
But my site is just direct. You just go to it, you click it, you get the book right away.
Okay, hang on just one second. I want to do that now. I want to at least put it in my phone so that when we're through talking, I can just hit the order button. Okay.
Okay.
Give me a quick second here. I knew you wouldn't mind that at all. Because hey, look,
that's why we're here, right?
Exactly. When you write a book, you don't know that. That's the easiest part. Selling your book and marketing your book.
By the way, I appreciate what you wrote. The book that you wrote. I saw some information and interviews you did on that.
Okay, good deal.
We really need that information, and that's good stuff. Because I went through it too. I'm divorced, and I had to pay child support, and I understand that. But when you said that once you write the book, that's almost the easy part. The hard part is marketing it, because that hit me. That hit me right away, because I sent mine to Simon and Schuster, all the big.
Sure.
I figured, they'll love this, but I didn't really understand how that whole business works, and that there's certain things they're looking for and certain things that they don't want. They're kind of gatekeepers for a lot of information. So it's all good, because that way it boosts our entrepreneurship.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And being a self-publisher like I am and you are, it gives us a certain voice and a certain uncensored power to give people the facts and not be afraid that you're going to lose all of your foundation and your financing because you believe really about something. You have a real firm belief about something.
Yeah.
So it's almost like freedom, just like the freedom we were talking about earlier. Having your rights, having those rights allowed you and I to write these books. And that's what's being challenged right now.
Absolutely. So you said you wanted to get the
let me
website?
Give it to me right now.
Okay. It's Inner Civilization, just like the title of the book, INNER.
Okay.
Civilization with no space in between.
Okay.
All right.
.com? Innercivilization.com?
But if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see where you could purchase the book.
Got it. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go
And it's real
directly
simple.
through you. The Amazon did come up first, but I'm gonna go directly through you because I know you said I could go directly through you. So
I can definitely guarantee that you'll get the book, because there's an email exchange and,
yeah, it's all good. It's all good, brother. I'm gonna support you, man. This is a great.
Thank you.
I'm glad my assistant introduced me to you. It was just out of the blue. She said, "I think you and this guy, you need to talk, and you guys have a lot of things in common, a lot of information to share." And she said it would be just a great interview for you. So her name is Taronda Hillman, and
Yeah.
she was the one that hooked us up. So I got to give her all the
That's
credit.
Jerry's friend, Jerry Reese.
Yes.
Yeah, because she said that she might have an interview with you June 1st or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But let me just finish up about the Israelites.
Go ahead.
So the point that I was making was that it's not definite that it's obvious that all Black people aren't Hebrews, because there were a lot of other people, in ancient times, and they've tried to kind of put them all together under the three sons of Noah, but that's the way they told history back then. And actually, there wasn't history as we know it now back then. They had a story, they had a narrative that worked for their culture, and doesn't mean it's 100% factual or meant to be 100% factual.
Right.
It's a narrative.
Okay. So
now, but what happened was
Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, is that a narrative too?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. I know exactly what can be proven. And this is not to say what can be proven in history is the only history or is the truth, because there's so much we can't know. There's so many tribes in Africa that didn't write down their history. That doesn't mean they didn't exist.
Sure.
Makes a lot
of sense. Yeah.
So, but we do know this. I'll tell you just a couple things we do definitely know. We know that David existed because there's a stela in ancient Egypt that mentioned King David in their language. There's we know that Ezra, Amos, and a few other people in the Old Testament existed because there are other sources like in Assyria and Egypt that verify their existence. So people who come along and say, "Oh, everything in the Bible is a fairy tale," that's not true. That's not true, because a lot of this information can be verified. Sure. Even people nowadays are trying to say, there's some people who say that, "Oh, Jesus didn't exist, he's like Santa Claus or a fairy tale." That's not true either, because he's documented from a number of sources within 100 years of his time. And actually there's some within 30 years of his time that documented his existence, on a historical level. And there are atheist historians that will tell you, no, Jesus definitely existed as a historical figure. But that doesn't mean he necessarily rose from the dead, or that he is God or things like that, in the way that it's taught. I mean, obviously that takes a little understanding to say that yes or no, But let me just say right now what my book is about, just real clear.
Sure.
The name of it is Inner Civilization, and it can be understood on three levels. Number one,
published the book. When was it published?
Excuse me?
When was
it was published in 2009.
Okay. Wow, it's been out there since then?
Been out there for a while, yeah. Yeah. Incredible. Sold like thousands of copies already, but I wanted to create a classic because I don't know if you've heard of Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization, Stolen Legacy. There are a few classics out there by Black authors. Okay. And I looked at them, and they're good for their time period.
Sure.
But I wanted something that was more comprehensive, you know? So what it is, inner civilization means drawing from within our culture,
Okay.
which goes back at least 8,000 years that we could tell. You know, and I know it goes further back than that, but talking about recorded history. So we have that to draw from within our own history instead of just imitating what everybody else is doing. Okay. Second is inner civilization, meaning developing our insides, like our knowledge, our spirit, our spiritual centers, the inner part of us. That has to be developed and formed and organized. And then the third part is once that's well formed, it naturally comes out into culture, into civilization. And I say right here in America because why not have a culture that benefits us where we live?
Absolutely.
Instead of looking out towards someone else. I mean, the obvious thing is to say, oh yeah, we're Africans, let's do what Africans do. But we've been here for so long, we're still Africans. So whatever we do is still African, you know? But we're in America, so whatever we do is still American. We just have to do it. And we just have to do it for our own benefit. And the first sentence of the book says, all this can be done within the legal and economic framework and political framework of America. Like you said, we have freedom of assembly.
Yes.
You know, we have all these freedoms that we fought for in the civil rights movement. Let's use them now.
Absolutely.
For our benefit.
You know, Alan, I'm going to have you pause just for a second here, and I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce you again. This is, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Relevance Podcast. My guest tonight is Mr. Alan Dixon. He's the author of a great book about the Black culture. It's called Inner Civilization. And Mr. Dixon is on our show tonight to tell us a lot more about the book. Okay. So go ahead, Alan.
Yeah. So basically what I was saying was develop from within our culture, internalize it, and then manifest it in this country. And the reason I figured it was worth writing a book was because I read our history, especially, you know, since the civil rights movement, and you have two competing ideas, or really, we could say three and there are more, but three main ones. One is integration. And we all know what that generally means. Two is we were influenced by a lot of the radical left, and you start hearing talk about revolution, you know, in the 60s and the 70s. So you have integration, revolution, and then you have an element that was talking about separation from America. So if you look at these three, let's take out revolution for example. No, we'll leave that in there. What my book is talking about is the fact that we don't have to necessarily dissolve ourselves to integrate into another culture or another system, because
we have our own.
We have our own, and it's not in conflict with America.
Everybody else's.
Everybody else, Greek people,
their own.
German, they all have their own.
And we don't bother them about theirs.
Right. And it doesn't stop them from pursuing what America has to offer.
Absolutely.
And why should we be different? Part of it is because we were raised in this kind of protest mentality where we're doing it to get back at white people, or we're doing it to show them that we aren't fooled by them. But what I'm saying is we need to do this so that we can develop our children and live to our full potential as human beings on this earth, wherever we live.
Absolutely.
We happen to live in America right now. And so we have to make the best of it and make the most of it. We're not here to survive.
Right.
We're here to thrive. We're here to develop and flourish. Absolutely. And if we can't flourish here, once we get enough wherewithal, We don't have to, we can move. We could go to Africa. We could come back. We could go wherever we want to go if we have that amount of wealth, that amount of know-how, that amount of ability, and the willingness to be flexible and adaptable to whatever's going on.
Absolutely.
But we've been stuck in this black-white thing or this slave-master. That's old, and it's going to get worse. And one thing I mentioned in my book was this whole idea of Black English, because when I wrote it, that was kind of a big thing, Ebonics and Black English. And I looked at it from a perspective of our best interests. I have a chapter called Best Interests. And what it's saying is that the first thing we ask is, how does this benefit us? How does this behavior benefit us as a whole in the long run? And I used a few examples. One of them is Ebonics. So a lot of us believe that by speaking a certain way, which is really broken English from 18th century sharecropper, or like slavery or sharecropper language, that makes us Black, or that's our language. And what I ask is this: how does it benefit us? The language of business, the language of science, the language of economics, the language of banking, etc. Standard American English. Let's master that. We didn't get a chance to for the past 300 years. Let's master that. Now, does that say we have to sound white and speak a certain? No, it's not saying that.
You know you have to do that to get jobs nowadays.
No, you don't have to do that. You have to know if you know your standard English, you know your grammar, you have an extensive vocabulary, and you can communicate. That's the whole point. It's a tool. It's a tool of communication.
Absolutely.
You don't have to change your tone.
No,
that's not necessary. Right. I mean, look at, there are few examples of this, and one of my favorites, and there aren't that many, is like Denzel Washington. He comes across as intelligent. He comes across clear, but he doesn't change. He's from Mount Vernon. I'm from, I know the accent and I know the sound. He hasn't changed that at all.
Right.
But he speaks in clear English.
Exactly. Yeah, there's
Malcolm X.
Yes.
Look at Malcolm X. He couldn't have done what he did, or he wouldn't have. He's one of the top orators in the history of America. And I'm not talking about Black America. I'm talking about America. He and Martin Luther King, they both spoke standard English.
Sure.
Now, my point is this. I'm not against Black English per se, but I'm just asking, how does that benefit us?
Right.
That's all I'm asking.
No, that's a good question. It's a great hypothetical question.
Well, we got to show them that they didn't take our intelligence. No, they didn't take our intelligence. Right. We always have our genius, but how do we apply it? Well, white English is not our language. Okay. Well, then learn African languages.
Right.
Learn those, but you're living in America.
So learn
if you want to excel, if you want to develop and build, you have to know the language. If we were taken captive in China and then we're free, how can we ever excel if we don't know Chinese? It's that simple.
No, I totally get it. Yes.
And I know there are a lot of emotional aspects to this that, well, we shouldn't have to learn the King's English or whatever. Mm. But I'm saying on a practical level that language is a tool of communication. And the better you master it, the better you can communicate.
Absolutely.
And that's it.
You broke up there for a minute, but
okay.
I'll definitely take care of that in my pre-production, my post-production editing.
Yeah.
But no, just keep on. We're going to take just a few minutes. We're going to pause for a second here, pay some bills, and I'm going to stop the recording there for a second there, Alan, and then you and I can keep talking, and then once we come back from the break, we'll start the recording back again, okay? All right, just
okay. To get other people
we're gonna get back started again there. Alan, go ahead.
Okay. So we're back going.
Yes, we're back on now.
Yeah. Yes,
Fake
no, we
news.
were just talking. I was just saying about the label conspiracy theorists, and you know what happens in a lot of the we'll just call it propaganda or corporate news, is
Sure.
that
Mainstream media.
mainstream media is that they use a lot of sound bites, as we know, but the
Right.
sound bites are emotionally potent.
Yes.
They're quick and they give you an emotional feeling,
Right.
and it shuts down thought
Yes.
and it shuts down information because they'll label you, and then they don't have to deal with anything you have to say.
Right.
And I'm an attorney, and it's a tactic that's even used in court. Like if a witness comes, say you somebody said you robbed a store, and the witness saw you on the telephone in your car and never even went in the store, and he testifies in court, the prosecutor is going to bring him bring him to the stand and try to break down his testimony.
Right.
Sir, do you wear glasses? Yes, I
Right.
wear glasses. Did you have them on that day? No, I didn't have them on. So we don't even know what you saw. Things like that.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right. Right.
and so that's his job as the prosecutor to do that.
Sure.
This is a legit, it could be a very legit witness, but
Right.
his job is to try to label him, and they can't really do this, but aren't you an alcoholic? And, defense would say object and say, okay, but he's got it in the minds of the jury already.
Right,
You can't
right,
trust
right.
this
Hey,
guy.
one of the most famous ones was when your guy for O.J. Simpson, what was his name? The lawyer, the famous
Oh,
lawyer.
Johnny Cochran.
Yeah, he said if the glove don't fit, you must have quit. That right there will probably go down in history as the biggest influencer in terms of like how it influenced the jury,
Yeah.
everything.
And that's how we think. That's how we've kind of been trained, and so somebody says something like conspiracy theorists, that shuts down information.
Absolutely. Well, just like when Trump was very, I guess, outspoken about fake news, fake media, fake news. It was almost like, he wanted everything that was against him or anybody that was speaking against him at that particular time to be considered as fake news. They're just trying to do fake news. So once he puts that into the minds of the people out there, they start, thinking a certain way. So, I mean, you're right. It does. It makes it moves certain things within your body and in your mind, man, and it controls the narrative, about the whole situation. So,
Yeah,
you're
and
right.
we don't have, again, like going back to what my book is about, we don't have any structures in place to balance ourselves.
Right.
Meaning we, like in ancient Egypt, they weren't against emotion, but they believed that the heart coordinated the mind and the emotions,
So
and
the
that they
heart
should all
drove
work in
everything.
tandem.
Yes.
They should work together. You
Right.
can't if your emotions are running things, then you're not functioning on the balanced proper level. You're not a
Isn't
whole
that the
human being.
truth? Isn't that the truth?
And that's what's happening. But we don't have any we don't have any spiritual practice or whatever amongst ourselves in general to even set up an understanding like this.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure as individuals we do, like somebody learns something here, somebody learns something there. But what my book is about is that most people move by culture, meaning you have individuals, but then there's this kind of environment that's created that supports the group. And the more you develop and put into that structure, into that environment, into that culture, because culture comes from the word cultivate, which is to develop. So you put into it, and then it enriches you in return. There's kind of a reciprocal nature to it. And so what we need is something that we put into so that even if a parent's not home, or there's a single parent family,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody didn't have a dad or didn't have any friends to mentor them, there's a culture out there that's going to nourish you. there's a culture out there that's going to kind of guide you and structure you in a positive way. And
Absolutely.
and the culture's always there, but what happened with us is that because we haven't been able to take control and have real self-determination for the past 400 years, what existed was kind of a default culture that drags us down.
Okay.
And that's when you get into drugs and the crime and
chronic
all
TV watching. Go ahead and throw that in there.
Yeah.
The chronic TV watchers that sit there and believe everything that they hear, see, and read on TV. And they don't go back and research it or challenge it in any other way to try to confirm it. They feel like, just like with the moon landing, the fake moon landing, I'm going to call it fake. When you see it on TV, just because you saw it, that makes it true. So go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, and so let me just say this right quick before, I don't want to run out of time.
Okay.
I just wanted to run through the chapters of my book, because it's kind of a step-by-step process.
Absolutely. Okay?
So the first one is positive identification. And all that's saying is we now have the freedom to develop an identity for ourselves that's going to benefit us. We're not defined by other people. We're not defined by even Africa. We're defining ourselves in the best way possible, because how you define yourself kind of incorporates your goals and your purpose. So we're wide open. It takes thought, but we can start now and start focusing on developing a real identity for who we are and what we do and what we don't do. Just like, without thinking about it, most people say, oh, we don't play hockey, but we should start working on things like we don't use drugs,
Right.
Because back to best interest, I'll get to that, but how do they benefit us?
Right.
How is being completely open to crack and heroin and things like that, how has that helped us?
Right.
Obviously not. So certain things, we didn't do that in Africa. If that's who we are, if we're really Africans, we have to start doing things that we did when we set our feet on these shores. And remember that our ancestors wanted to get back to their way of life. You see? So we have to incorporate that way of life into who we are now. So anyway, positive identification.
Positive identification.
Number one. Number two, beyond protest. This chapter just we realize that we've been in kind of protest mode for a good 60 years. And everything we do is in protest.
Right.
But what are we doing to build?
Right.
So let's think beyond protest. Think about the shortcomings it gives us, because, okay, we have signs and we march. They already know we're going to do that. But they still do what they're doing anyway, whatever it is, because they're making plans. There's a system. If we believe that there's a system that's not benefiting us or that's out to get us, we have to come up with a system to counteract that. We can't just say, hey, that's wrong. You have a system that's hurting us. No, we have to have a system that shields us from the nonsense, but also gives us the ability to flourish within this system that may not be built for us. We build one for ourselves. And like I said, it can still work within this larger system.
Gotcha.
3 is why a culture.
Why a culture?
Why a culture? Why a culture is so important for us to build. And all I say with that is, there's an analogy I give in the beginning of the chapter. Let's say you were downtown. You have a downtown where you are?
Yes, of course.
Say you're downtown.
Beautiful.
And you see a man who's like blind or half blind, just bumping into people, bumping into buildings. He's just, he doesn't know where he's going all around. He doesn't, know what he's doing. And you walk up to him and you say, hey, what's going on? He says, somebody stole my glasses. Now, would it end there? No, You say, well, what happened to them? Well, someone stole them. Well, we're going to have to get you a new pair of glasses. And if he says, well, they won't be the same as my old glasses, it doesn't matter. You need some glasses so that you can stop bumping into people and buildings, etc. And they might even be better than the ones you had before because
So
they'll be
open up your
designed.
mind. So basically, open up your mind to be able to move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And that if we lost the structure, like whenever you hear, people talk about what Black people should be doing or what they may be doing that's not positive, they say, oh, well, we had our culture taken from us. We were slaves for 400 years. And they stopped there. Just like the man who said he had his glasses taken. But it doesn't stop there. You have to get a new set of glasses. You have to get a new culture that suits you.
Absolutely. It's just like a good analogy is moving with technology. Just like you're moving with technology, those old school people, I don't talk on cell phones, I don't do voicemail, I don't do this and that.
Right,
well, guess
right.
what? You're going to get left behind if you don't do this stuff. So
now I got to keep up myself because you're absolutely right. But that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And if you look up the working definition of intelligence, it's the ability to adapt.
Absolutely.
Because if you look at even animals, that's how they measure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you put them in a situation they're not aware of, they figure it out.
Yes.
Label them intelligent.
With evolution, I just wanted to jump in right quick because this is what I wrote about. My thesis in college was the evolution of the hummingbird. Think about it. When the hummingbird didn't start out with a beak that long, okay? But over the years, they learned that they were going to need a beak that long, and their actions and their behavior formulated that long beak that they have to go in there and get that pollen out of there. And they didn't start out like that. So that just shows you that the evolution can happen over the course of, generations.
You and I have to talk about that. Because I have a small section on evolution. Right. And part of it, I was just using an example because I read the book Darwin's Black Box about intelligent design. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've read some Darwin stuff, but not that one.
Yeah, but we'll talk. That's
okay.
But I like your example.
Yeah.
And there's something else that I've learned over the last few years. It's called epigenetics, and it's close to what you're saying about evolution. Actually, it might be part of the whole process of evolution, and that is that the way you interpret your environment affects your biological structure.
Yes.
And that it actually changes your physiology, to the extent that it can.
Absolutely.
So, and so like we're saying, adaptation is very important,
Absolutely.
So then the next chapter is division. And what I try to do here is show there is a clear division. Okay, fine. You want to say Black and white together, we're all one. That's nice. I have no problem with that. But you have to understand that the Europeans are people with a specific, distinct history. And we're people with a specific, distinct history. And those backgrounds affect the way we think, the way we move, and just like we were saying, almost, down to our psyche.
Right.
Now, if you ask most Black people what Black people were doing in the Middle Ages or medieval times, or no, let's put it like this. What was going on in medieval times? They'll think and they'll start talking about knights in shining armor and the lances and castles and things like that. And that shows how bad off we are, because that means our mindset goes back into another people's history instead of our own. What were we doing in Africa in 1400, in 1200, in 1300? We almost draw a blank there, you see? So what we have to do is understand that there is a distinction between who we are and who Europeans are. And I do something different than most Black books is I have a long synopsis and narrative of European culture.
Okay.
From my point of view, and this is straight up. This is not glorifying it. It's not attacking it, but it's giving you the real truth of what was going on. Like I was mentioning before, in the Dark Ages, all the way back to Rome, and then I show later on what was going on with us from Nubia all the way up to now.
Okay.
Just to show, because most people say, well, why don't we just accept American culture and just do what America does? But America is built from different ethnic groups, different cultures from Europe, and even from us that they've adapted for their own benefit. You know, because European culture comes from what they've learned from the Moors, what they've learned from ancient Egypt as well. And they've adapted it for their own benefit. You see, and they've taken from Native America too, in here, you know, in this country. So us knowing our culture will only make us better Americans, more viable Americans with substance.
Absolutely.
Making us out of sync with America. You see, so that's the vision.
Yes.
5 is best interest, which we were talking about before. We've been kind of maneuvered into this whole thing that we're supposed to get race relations together for this country and make people hold hands, black and white together and all this
Did
kind of stuff.
Obama do that? Did the 8 years of Obama do that?
No.
Okay.
But my point is, other people came to this country for one main reason, and that is to make money, to develop themselves and their families, and to live better lives than they lived before they got here. They have a purpose. They had a purpose for coming here.
Right.
Now, we unfortunately didn't come here by our own will. And it shows. We didn't come here with a purpose in mind, and it shows. So what I'm saying is, after 1965 or 1970, when we got our freedom, you know, civil rights and everything, because they're on the books. Civil rights is on the books. Anything else is attitude that other people have. So since 1970, we've been free. So what we have to do is develop things for our best interest and figure out what our purpose here is. Because we're going to be here for another, what? I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, whatever, who knows? So at some point we have to stop and say, this is why we're here. This is what we want to do. Instead of waiting to see what other people are doing and just kind of piggybacking off of that.
Absolutely.
You know, so we look at our best interest, and then we look at some things that we were told is ours, but we got to check, is it in our best interest? And I have a section here on soul food. And when I wrote this, that movie had just come out, and I was kind of baffled by the fact that Big Mama died from diabetes, which is related to diet, but nobody talked about it.
Right.
You know, and what I get into in that analysis is that this isn't the diet that we chose for ourselves when we were free. Yeah, we can go on about how the pig saved us, chitlins saved us, and all these things saved us.
Right.
But at the same time, heart disease, hypertension, all this stuff comes from that same diet. Now, as free people, we can stop and use in a civilization. We had diets in Gambia. We had diets in the Mediterranean, in Africa, you know, southern Mediterranean, that were way healthier in ancient Egypt.
Right.
Way healthier than the diet, the soul food diet that wasn't even ours. Those are just leftovers from southern white people. So is it in our best interest? Maybe we'll say, yeah, watermelon is good because it flushes out the system. Boom, let's keep watermelon. But let's go through it and analyze it now as free people and say, what's in our best interest? Is this particular diet in our best interest? And if it's not, throw it out.
Absolutely.
We have to be, like you said, move on. We have to be ready to move on. Now, some people will say, oh, well, that kept us alive for all this time and all this. Okay, fine. We'll honor it. We'll put it in a museum, you know?
Right.
But it's just like if you have a raft, like say your ancestors were stuck on an island and they figured out how to build a raft to get back, to the mainland. And from that point on, your people only travel in rafts, while other people have speedboats and ski-doos and
airplanes.
Yeah, you're right. And you're like, no, that's how we got here. Our ancestors came over on a raft, so we all got to have rafts now. That's who we are. No, at some point you stop and say, is this in our best interest? When people are drowning, people are falling into the water from this raft, like, come on, And so that's what I'm doing. I'm saying, like, let's look at our best interests. Let's look at everything we're doing now, fresh, okay? The next one is consensus. My ideas are just my ideas. I'm not saying I'm 100% right, but let's meet up and try to figure out what's the best course to take. We don't have to meet. We don't need a leader telling us what to do. Those days are past. Let's sit down as reasonable people and get this information together. Again, we have freedom of assembly now. We were scared to meet for the past 300 years because there's a black code to break up any black people who in more than 2 or 3, together at one time. But that's not the case anymore. Right. We can meet now. We have to shake off that fear. And we can talk about real issues. We have to shake that off. So that's consensus. Next is developing Black thought. And I go through the importance of a discipline, a certain way of thinking that's going to propel you into just a better lifestyle, a better reality. And it's a discipline. And we haven't really been focusing on anything like that at all. So I can go into the details, but that's
no,
good.
I mean, a good comparison with that is a good parallel to that is reading. You and I are both advocates of promoting reading. That's why we wrote books. Okay, our culture needs to read more. Okay.
People told me I should put more pictures in my book and have it in big letters, and I said that kind of defeats what I'm saying. How do we expect to compete or get ahead? Say there is a revolution. We haven't read anything, so what are we going to do after the revolution's over? Say we separate. We still have to figure all these things out from the nuts and bolts, how to build institutions. So why not do it now while we can?
Right.
So anyway, you're absolutely right. We can start with reading. And what I do is try to tie in now. We see how important ancient Egypt is. They invented writing, or we invented writing. Now we have this, writing ain't for us. They invented mathematics. Oh, mathematics isn't our thing. Well, who are we? Who are you talking about? Because who we really are invented mathematics. And it goes back to, that's what I'm saying, knowing exactly who we are. And not just knowing that we invented mathematics, but knowing what mathematics did we actually put together. How did the Egyptians, like we're going back to the pyramids, how did they indicate these different equations? Because a lot of people say, well, they never found any mathematical text written in ancient Egypt, which is not necessarily true, but in old Egypt, the old kingdom, like 2700 BC, they haven't really found any architecture, the plans or anything to how to build the pyramids or the math behind it.
Right.
But the math is in the buildings.
Yes.
You can look.
Yeah.
Right. They found pi, the 3.14. That.
Yes.
It's all throughout the pyramids. That equation is in it. It's built into it.
Yes.
But anyway, developing Black thought. How did we get to? And I go through that. How did we get to? Reading and writing and arithmetic. That's not our thing. To from where we were before. And it goes back to perspective. We've been taught that we are up from slavery. We were slaves. Now look at, we're going to college now. We're doing all these great things now. But no, we have to look at who we were before slavery, see, and go from there. So now we look and we're saying like, wow, we've taken a few steps down from where we used to be, from the level of learning that we had. Even like, again, from the best interest, from our diet. Our diet was way better before, you know? So we have to look on a larger scale. And then the last two chapters, one is Inner Civilization itself, and it describes this whole process. And then the last one is called An American Plan. And it just reinforces that everything I'm talking about isn't in conflict with anything in any American principles at all.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Calvin Coolidge said, the business of America is business.
Okay.
Once we start getting into business, our mindset starts to change. We realize, you know, we have a lot of run-ins with the police right now, right? The police are here to protect property. If we were more about our business, legitimate business, and developing that and building that, we wouldn't have a lot of run-ins with these police, because why would we be out on the streets?
Right.
You know?
Yes.
People act like we're supposed to be out on the streets like that. We're not supposed to be out on the streets like that. Who else is? Other people come from other cultures, and I'm not even talking about racial. Ethiopians come over here. I was in DC. They have businesses, coffee shops, all kinds of things that they developed for themselves. And they just got here 30, 40 years ago, tops. Right. And we've been here for 400 years plus. And we're still like not sure what we should be doing.
Right.
You know, and all I'm saying is it's an American plan. And one important thing is that I do get into what used to be seen as this class structure, that you have educated Black people who haven't really taken as much of an interest in the masses, or, you know, what people consider lower class, or however you want to characterize it. And what I say is that obviously we're all one, but we both have a responsibility. People who don't have the opportunities have a responsibility to try to do better. And we have a responsibility to try to help ourselves and them, you know? But historically, a lot of the so-called Black elite, and I'm sure you're aware of the Boule organization, and these elites who, instead of doing what I'm talking about, legitimizing and canonizing our real history and making it accessible to the kids and building museums of different things that'll keep us interested and focused on what we should be doing, they're imitating what Europeans are doing, what European Americans are doing. And they're completely enamored with whatever's going on with them. And they couch it as, oh, we're trying to integrate, or I'm the first one doing this, you know, like Malcolm was talking about. But what you're really doing is abandoning your position, because now that you have information, you got to pass it on.
Right.
You know? That's all. And so that's the book.
Well, man, it's a great book. And Alan, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have been discussing a wonderful book by a gentleman by the name of Alan Dixon. His book is Inner Civilization, Redeveloping Black Culture and Civilization in America. And Alan, I'll let you go ahead and do the last plug for your book and what you're doing right now, and then we'll close out the show.
Okay. Well, it's very simple. The name of the book again is Inner Civilization. It's on redeveloping Black culture and civilization in America. The website is innercivilization.com. You go on there. There's actually more content than in this book. online in the different articles in the blogs. But you go on there, innercivilization.com. Any question you have, any information you need, it's right in there. You just search it. And if you want to get the book, it's up in the top right-hand corner. You just press pay, or I think it's PayPal or Pay Now, and the book will be delivered to you in a day, in two or 3 days, 4 days tops.
That's wonderful, man. Hey, just coming from a fellow author who's out there, who knows the importance of putting books out there on the market that are going to help people, that are going to be books that really make a difference. This is one of them, and it's definitely going to be on my shelf as soon as possible. So I'm going to order mine as soon as we get off the air here. And what I want to do is, Alan, I want to invite you back to the show. I try to keep these shows under an hour just for recording purposes, just to be able to handle all of the audio and video. They can get really huge, after an hour. But I want you to come back and do another segment just on about your book or about whatever else.
Whatever's going on, I'll be happy to come through.
Absolutely. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again, Mr. Alan Dixon. We're going to close out the Relevance Podcast tonight. We thank you guys for listening, and you guys have a wonderful evening. Take care.